Video contains violent content, details that are not suitable for common perception. Please consider before watching. Chapter 57. Out of curiosity, Mok Jung-un slightly extended his arm towards the void in the direction where the death energy was flowing and chanted the oral secrets in his mind. It was the art of binding technique. Can you feel it? That's the subtle principle of the art of binding technique. You can pull and attach anything. That's no exception even for energy. Chong Ryong had definitely said that. Although the distance was far, the death energy was filling everywhere as so many boys were dying. With this much, it might be quite possible. Boundless and unceasing, the two energies combine to form the heart above. The original form is innate, the supreme form is acquired. The demonic barrier opens the supreme blood gate. Even though his chi channels were sealed by the forbidden gate lock, the art of binding technique wasn't a concept deployed with internal energy. This was a special power that came solely from the oral secrets themselves. The hand extended towards the empty void. The corners of Mok Jung-un's mouth twitched as he concentrated. Whoosh. The confirmation that started with a light heart, thinking it would be fine if it didn't work. Fortunately, it fit. The death energy rippling all around began to be sucked into Mok Jung-un's hand. It was a tremendous amount of death energy. It's adhering. Originally, he thought only the nearby death energy would be sucked in. But a coincidental event occurred. As the death energy around Mok Jung-un was sucked in, the unique flow created by it caused the energy spreading in all directions to ride that flow. Perhaps he could obtain even more death energy than at Yun Mok Sword Manor. Mok Jung-un inwardly spoke as he looked at the boys still engaging in a bloody struggle. Kill and die more. The more they killed each other, the more he benefited. There was one gaze looking at Mok Jung-un with a puzzled expression. It was the demon mask. What is he doing? Most of the attention was on the valley where the struggle was taking place. But the demon mask had unconsciously glanced at the front of the incense burner and discovered Mok Jung-un extending his arms slightly towards the valley. He didn't know what he was doing. So he heightened his chi sense and looked at Mok Jung-un. But he couldn't feel anything. Is it an overreaction? Well, with his chi channels sealed by the forbidden gate lock, there was no way he could do anything. It was a situation where even chi circulation was impossible. However, he couldn't help but be quite bothered by his actions. While he was thinking that, the warrior next to him spoke. The incense stick is almost burned out. Time was almost up. In the meantime, the number of boys who had entered slightly exceeded 400. The boys who died fighting among themselves alone were close to 200, and the remaining 200 were engaged in a bloody battle. Sizzle. The incense stick was precariously burning down to the bottom line. The demon mask raised his hand. Then, the warriors in red belts who had been waiting around the edges of the valley simultaneously drew the weapons at their waists. Shing. Thing. At this sight, the boys fighting over the iron balls became even more desperate. If they didn't hurry, they would die. It awakened the hidden tenacity and strong desire to live within the boys. Die, die. Smash. Smash. Get out of the way. Crunch. Arg. Why you bit me, you bastard. Smashing heads with rocks, and if that doesn't work, even biting and clinging on. It was downright gruesome. Even those who were watching and had managed to sit in front of the incense burner after fighting couldn't just look at it as someone else's business. This was just the beginning. But among them, one boy stood out. Crack. Ugh. As if he had awakened, he was indiscriminately killing the surrounding boys, having been inconspicuous until now. It was none other than Mok Yucheon. Mok Yucheon, who couldn't accept killing others without any grudge, had aimed only to find the iron ball and stand in front of the incense burner. However, the situation had pushed even Mok Yucheon to the edge of a cliff. Ha ha ha. The moment he found the iron ball, the boys trying to kill him to snatch it, and the incense stick that had almost burned out. This situation eventually made even Mok Yucheon the same as them. Shit. Shit. He didn't know how many he had killed, but in the end, Mok Yucheon was able to reach the front of the incense burner after fending off all the boys targeting his iron ball. Arriving at the incense burner, he raised the blood-stained iron ball. Pass. The moment he heard that shout, all the tension dissipated and he plopped down on the ground. The first thought that came to Mok Yucheon as he sat down was this. I'm alive. I survived. A sense of relief that made him shiver. He had managed to survive a hellish moment. The fear that he might die brought about a tenacious fierceness to live. However, soon, a sense of self-loathing came over him as he looked at his blood-stained palms. What have I done? Certainly it was for his own survival, but what is this? It felt like he had become a beast for a moment, not a human. While he was thinking that, the demon mask's shout was heard. The incense stick has burned out completely. Kill them. Chong. As soon as that order was given, screams continuously erupted from the valley water not long after. The boys whose danjian were sealed couldn't even resist. The warriors counted the number of boys sitting in rows in front of the incense burner. And that number was determined. The total number of surviving boys was 468. Kidby said that nearly 40% had died. 60%, not bad. However, the demon mask had no significant interest in those who died. Rather, if about 60% survived in the first gateway, it wasn't bad for the initial weeding out process. After the counting was finished, the demon mask spoke to the boys in front of the incense burner. I sincerely congratulate those who have passed the first gateway. The boys just listened quietly. Although it was only for 2 hours, they were exhausted from doing all sorts of things to survive. Looking at them, the demon mask continued. Since you obtained the iron balls, you must have realized. The numbers engraved on the iron balls are different for each one. Remember them well. That will be your designation here. Then we will immediately begin the second gateway. Murmur, murmur. At the demon mask's words, the boys who had been catching their breaths stirred. They thought they could rest a bit now. But they were going to proceed with the second gateway right after the first one ended? Especially for those who passed late when the incense stick was almost burned out, it was naturally agonizing. Shit. Ma Qiqiang was the same. Putting aside the self-loathing, he hadn't even recovered his stamina yet, so how long could he endure if he had to do this nonsense again? Regardless of their reactions, the demon mask pointed to the mountain beyond the valley with his hand and said, "The second gateway is to endure on that mountain from now until dawn." Until dawn. It was late at night now. It was around sunset when they had set out for this place. After walking for about 3 hours without rest and then going through the first gateway for 2 hours. Considering this, they had roughly 3 hours left until dawn. Is it just enduring this time? If that was the case, it could be said to be more manageable than finding iron balls. Even if there were crazy ones obsessed with competition, if they just found a suitable place and hid, they could conserve their stamina and rest. Since the forbidden gate lock was still inserted, they wouldn't be able to utilize their chi sense, so it was quite possible. Most of them seemed to have similar thoughts, showing relieved expressions. However, it couldn't be this simple. The demon mask spoke. I will state the conditions that come with it. Conditions? What does that mean again? There are 40 flags stuck on the mountain. The number of people who can be at a flag is 8. Exactly 8 people must be at that location until dawn. Murmur, murmur. At those words, everyone stirred again. As expected. It couldn't go easily. It can't be more or less than 8. If such a case occurs, you die. Silence hung in the air. Upon hearing the conditions, everyone was thinking about the gist of this gateway. This was the same for Ma Qiqiang. There are roughly 500 people here. But if there are 40 flags, it means only 320 can survive. It was announcing another bloody competition. However, there was a difference. If they found a flag, the 8 people had to work together for about 3 hours to defend it. Group cooperation. Everyone grasped the gist of this gateway. Of course, there would be many variables, but depending on how they cooperated, they could have conditions to endure efficiently. Swish. With this, everyone's gazes naturally turned towards each other, not the demon mask. There was no need to find a flag and form a team there. If they gathered the strongest and most useful teammates here and now, they might be able to easily overcome this gateway. Then, their gazes turned to those at the very front of the incense burner. They were the first to pass the first gateway and had overflowing stamina. Joining their group or recruiting them was the only way to gain the most advantageous position. It wasn't just those who passed late who were contemplating this. Those who passed first were also making their own calculations. The boy from the Vermilion Slaughter Valley who passed second also looked around and pondered. I quickly passed the first gateway and succeeded in managing my stamina, but the second gateway is immediately following. According to the conditions, it will be a situation where I can't let my guard down for even a moment. In that case, he might not be able to rest all night. With the small number of flags and maintaining the head count, there were bound to be many annoying situations. It's a situation where I have to stay up all night. But if the third gateway immediately followed this, the key was still conserving stamina. In a situation where they couldn't perform qi circulation, that was huge. If their internal energy wasn't sealed, they could take turns circulating qi and recover their stamina. But now it was an extreme situation. I may have to avoid situations where I have to fight unnecessarily. That was the only way to fully preserve his stamina. Indeed, from that perspective, it was better to team up with the most useful guys. The boy from the Vermilion Slaughter Valley looked to his left and right. Mok Jaeungun and the muscular boy from the Esoteric Realm Gate. Along with himself, they were the first to pass the first gateway. Rather than looking for someone far away, it was more efficient for those with the most overflowing stamina to stick together and easily pass this gateway. I was going to finish first in the second gateway, but for this time it seemed better to join hands. The boy from the Vermilion Slaughter Valley furtively glanced at Mok Jaeungun to his left. He was trying to extend his hand first and establish a cooperative relationship. However, he saw Mok Jaeungun's lips twitching, those eyes that seemed to find it interesting, as if he was enjoying this situation. It was enough to make him feel unpleasant. It won't work. He had absolutely no desire to reach out to this bastard. Strangely, his instincts were telling him that he was the one who needed to be eliminated first among those here. While he was thinking that, Mok Jaeungun whispered first, "Do you want to team up with me?" What? Did this guy also judge that it would be advantageous to side with him? But after seeing that face just now, his desire to team up had disappeared. No. At this, Mok Jaeungun shrugged his shoulders and licked his lips. What a pity. He wanted to kill him first. Chapter 58. An odd, uncomfortable feeling that for some unknown reason, it seemed they shouldn't team up together. Because of that, the boy from the Vermilion Slaughter Valley, who had given up cooperating with Mok Jaeungun, whispered to the boy from the Esoteric Realm Gate next to him. "You're from the Esoteric Realm Gate, right?" "That's right. I'll get straight to the point. Let's not waste energy and do this gateway together." At the Vermilion Slaughter Valley boy's proposal, the Esoteric Realm Gate boy frowned as if considering it. It certainly wasn't a bad offer. Gathering with more capable people was a way to pass the gateway more easily. The Esoteric Realm Gate boy had seen the Vermilion Slaughter Valley boy earlier, hiding in the water and then pouncing on another boy to snatch the iron ball. It could be said to be a fairly excellent strategy. From that perspective, he could be helpful in this gateway, which required building a more strategic cooperative relationship than the iron ball struggle. However, do I really need to show even a bit of my skills to someone I might face in the next gateway? If they were together for 3 hours, he would end up revealing quite a lot. The less his faction's martial arts skills were revealed, the better. He judged that it would be more advantageous to avoid cooperating with the Vermilion Slaughter Valley and Demon Fire Hall boys, who were likely to survive until the end along with him. So the Esoteric Realm Gate boy said, "I refuse." "You'll regret it." "We'll see who regrets it." The Esoteric Realm Gate boy scoffed at his aggressive response. Then, as a last attempt, he tentatively asked the short-haired girl from the Demon Fire Hall, "Hey, Demon Fire Hall, what about you?" "Get lost." Rejection before he could even ask. The Esoteric Realm Gate boy closed his mouth with an irritated expression. Perhaps cooperating with them was impossible from the start. Huff, huff. The boys looked at the mountain beyond the valley with tense faces. The moment the signal was given, a 3-hour period more physically demanding than the earlier iron ball struggle would begin. It was that moment when their eyes and ears were focused. Begin. As soon as the demon mask shout was heard, the boys rushed towards the valley water all at once. Just like before, even in this gateway, it was advantageous to secure a higher position by hurrying. Splash, splash. The valley water was completely stained with blood due to the dead bodies. The scent of blood flowing from this valley water heralded another ordeal. A warrior watching them said to the demon mask, "They'll soon realize that the previous gateway was relatively easier." No gateway was easy. However, this gateway wasn't just about finding teammates that suited one's taste and defending the flag. It would be good to find the flags quickly. If they were perceptive, they would soon understand the meaning of the flags. The 468 boys who entered the mountain after the starting signal was given. Once the warriors in red belts were out of sight, the boys took 3 types of actions. The first was those who ran towards the mountain without stopping. The flags. I need to find the flags. They were the type who believed they had to find the flags first. Because the number of flags was limited, they considered that a priority over finding teammates. Of course, this wasn't a wrong choice either. If they found teammates but couldn't secure a flag, it would be meaningless. Nearly half, about 200 of them, were of this type. This included the muscular boy from the Esoteric Realm Gate and the girl from the Demon Fire Hall, who were regarded as strong candidates to survive until the end. And the second type. Hey, let's team up. You mean together? Yeah. There's no point in securing a flag first like them. It's better to form a team in advance and seize the flags. Huh. That way it's easier to defend the flag too. In this way, the boys who stopped each found teammates that suited their taste or could be helpful. Since time was pressing, it was happening quickly. Still, during this process of forming teams, there were no attacks on each other. They also implicitly avoided fighting here, knowing that once the teams were formed and they entered deep into the mountain, the stamina depletion would be even more severe. Yeah. This is how it should be. The boy from the Vermilion Slaughter Valley snickered inwardly. With himself as the lead, he had succeeded in making those who entered from 5th to 15th place as his teammates. No, it would be more accurate to say that they had voluntarily joined his group from the beginning. Normally, if the top 11 joined together, there would be 8 members, but some of them ran without stopping to find the flags first, so the team was formed like this. This will do. Could be said to be the most dominant team. Since they had passed the iron ball struggle in the upper ranks, they were composed of individuals who possessed both skill and strategy. So if they could just secure a flag, all they had to do was focus on conserving their stamina as much as possible. Let's go. With that, the boy from the Vermilion Slaughter Valley, who had formed his team the fastest, headed towards the mountain. Other boys also quickly formed teams and moved. Among them was Mok Yucheon, but not that guy. Mok Yucheon shook his head, looking at Mok Jaeyoung in the distance. Even though they were half-brothers, they were still brothers, so he had considered joining forces with him. However, he absolutely didn't want to. His affection had fallen as far as it could after being immobilized helplessly during the journey here. Whether he lives or dies, it's not my business. No. For now, his priority was his own survival. Fortunately, the guys nearby offered to team up with Mok Yucheon, so he was able to join them. Although it was creepy since they weren't from the righteous faction, he had no choice but to survive. He had to grasp at straws. I will survive. No matter what. Persuading himself like that, Mok Yucheon also set off with his teammates. Meanwhile, what are you trying to do, mortal? Chong Ryong, who was in Mok Jaeyoung's bosom, asked. In response, Mok Jaeyoung quietly answered in a whisper. I thought I'd try to find teammates. Why are you doing such a useless thing? Just find a flag and they'll naturally flock to you. Mok Jaeyoung shrugged his shoulders. Of course, what she said was also true. It was still early, and in a situation where the location of the flags was unknown, if he just secured one first, they would naturally join him even without pre-forming a team like this. Are you trying to manage your stamina or something? Forming a team in advance was to reduce risk by joining forces and conserve stamina. It could be seen as preparing for the next gateway in advance. However, that's not it. What? If it's not that, why is he trying to form a team now? Chong Ryong couldn't help but find it strange. In the first place, she knew well that he wasn't the type to cooperate with others on anything. But here Mok Jaeyoung encountered an unexpected problem. This is troublesome. Heh. Chong Ryong let out a scoff. That's because unexpectedly, when Mok Jaeyoung approached the boys to form a team, they distanced themselves as if on guard. Some had seen Mok Jaeyoung's cruel hands when he passed first. So they seemed to be reluctant to form a team with Mok Jaeyoung. Although they whispered softly, he could hear their voices. It might be better to get rid of that guy now. Did you see how he ripped out the throat to take out the swallowed iron ball? He's completely crazy. That aspect made them avoid Mok Jaeyoung. A considerable number found it burdensome to team up with Mok Jaeyoung, who had such a tendency, and thought it would be better to isolate him and eliminate him. Because of this judgment, they were in a hurry to avoid him when he approached. Seems like you made quite an unpleasant impression, mortal. I guess so. You just wasted time for nothing. As Chong Ryong said, if it was like this, it might be difficult to find teammates. He wanted to start a bit more comfortably, but should he change his approach? While he was thinking that, a boy with short hair timidly approached Mok Jae-young. Do you need a teammate? Yes. But we're 7 people. Want to join us? At the boy's suggestion, those around him whispered, who the hell is trying to bring that guy in? If they had even a little bit of sense, it would be better to exclude that guy in advance, since it would be annoying to compete with him later. That was swish. Because there was a girl waving her hand towards Mok Jae-young. She had exceptional beauty, and around her, 5 boys were accompanying her like bodyguards. It was a team formed with the Seoul girl at the center. A boy whispered softly, Soa, 1. Are you sure? That guy is a bit. Yeah. Even the other guys aren't accepting him in the same team because they judged it's better to exclude him in advance. Another boy agreed. At this, the girl named Soa smiled and said, Trust me. I trust you. But while other stupid guys think it's the answer to exclude him in advance, that's not it. Having that guy with us will be advantageous for us too. Soa had considered it but thought it would be beneficial to accept Mok Jae-young. Apart from his cruel hands, he was a guy with enough strength to rip out a throat with one hand even with his danjian sealed. If they had this guy with them, other teams wouldn't recklessly attack them. And we can just use him until dawn and then kill him. Do you think he can handle 7 people alone no matter how strong he is? She had even planned to eliminate him after using him. Of course, if this happened, one person would be left out at the end. But for this, one person was supposed to keep a distance and follow behind in advance. If that bastard died, that empty spot would be filled. Stupid guys. A useful pawn is meant to be used and discarded like this. Make him fight to his heart's content on our behalf, conserving our stamina and killing 2 birds with 1 stone. She scorned both her teammates and the other guys. The brain is meant to be used. Like that, within an hour, most had formed teams and entered the mountain. The team led by the Seoul girl named Soa was the same. From now on, it was a matter of quickly finding a flag and securing it. Otherwise, they would have to snatch a flag claimed by another team. While moving like that, Soa subtly approached Mok Jae-young. You were quite impressive earlier. Was I? I'm Soa. What's your name? I'm Mok Jae-young. Mok Jae-young? Soa tilted her head. It was a name she had never heard before. His cruel hands and seemingly considerable skill made her curious about his background, but she couldn't tell from just his name. Among the martial families, there's only one place with the Mok surname on the righteous side. Yun Mok Sword Manor, the famous martial family of Anhui Province. But there was no way someone from that righteous Mok family would be here. Then the only way was to ask directly. Where are you from? Does that matter? Does he mean he has no intention of telling me? Well, even if they had a cooperative relationship now, they would have to compete again later. The answer was to hide oneself as much as possible. This guy is quite handsome though. To call Mok Jae-young's appearance pretty would be an understatement. His beauty was exceptional enough to be described as having outstanding looks. It was even more so up close. Because of that, her interest was slightly piqued, contrary to her original plan. Should I try seducing him? Men were simple and surprisingly vulnerable to a woman's seduction. If she just pretended to show a little interest, they would fall for it on their own. In that sense, if she could make this guy hers, she might be able to use him a bit more without the need to eliminate him. Swish. Soa slightly loosened the collar of her top to reveal her cleavage and stuck close to Mok Jae-young. At this age, men's sexual desire was at its peak. So the effect was definite just by showing her ample cleavage and having their bodies touch. Soa, who had pressed her body against him, whispered, I like a guy like you. At this, Mok Jae-young glanced at her. Then he smiled and said, I feel the same way. Heh. As expected. Handsome or not, it didn't matter. If she deliberately seduced them, any man would fall for it like this. Tap. At that moment, Mok Jae-young placed his arm on her shoulder. Ha. Look at this. Since she seduced him, he was openly showing confidence. If it was like this, she might be able to seduce him faster than expected. If she coaxed him well and used him as her shield until the end and survived, she could adequately. I've been choosing since earlier. Huh. What is he talking about now? Grip. Mok Jae-young's wrist, which had been wrapping around her shoulder, grasped her neck. Then, crack. In an instant he twisted her neck. It happened so abruptly that she couldn't even scream or do anything, drawing her last breath and dying on the spot. Everyone was momentarily taken aback. They had just been watching, thinking she would coax Mok Jae-eun. But who would have known such a situation would unfold? A boy shouted, "Why, you crazy bastard, what are you doing?" At the boy's shout, Mok Jae-eun said, the corners of his mouth twitching, "Should I say it's a delightful mealtime?" In front of his eyes, all of them were appetizing prey that would fill him with death energy. The mountain was vast, so shouldn't he start comfortably? Chapter 59. Crack. Thud. The sight of Soa dying with her neck twisted left the teammates momentarily speechless. Since they had all gathered around her as their center, this death was all the more perplexing. Among them, one boy couldn't hold back and shouted, "Why, you crazy bastard, what are you doing?" No one had anticipated this situation. They had only thought to somehow use him and then discard him, trusting her. They still had stamina left and were watching with their own eyes, yet this happened right in front of them. Mok Jae-eun said, the corners of his mouth twitching, "Should I say it's a delightful mealtime? What nonsense are you spouting?" Another boy seemed to have come to his senses and retorted to Mok Jae-eun's words. Then, signaling to the other boys with his eyes, "Rumble, rumble." The 6 of them surrounded Mok Jae-eun in a circle. Seeing this, Mok Jae-eun slightly tilted his head and opened his mouth. Unexpected. "What? I thought you would be in disarray like bees following a queen bee." At Mok Jae-eun's words, the boys' expressions twisted fiercely. He had described them as fools infatuated with Soa, the soul girl, and unable to break free. So what fool wouldn't understand that? "You bastard, kill him. Don't get riled up." One boy shouted. Then, taking a stance with his fists towards Mok Jae-eun, he said, "Don't get agitated and fall for his scheme. Even if Soa is dead, the advantage is ours." "You're right. I almost fell for his trick. If they got excited and attacked one by one, they might be picked off instead." The ceiling of internal energy was the same condition, but the fact that he did this meant he had some confidence in dealing with them. "We'll subdue him with a coordinated attack. And let's kill him painfully as the price for killing Soa." "All right." Mok Jae-eun chuckled. "What a display of friendship." As soon as he finished speaking, Mok Jae-eun kicked the ground. The dirt rose up to knee height, and Mok Jae-eun's body instantly reached right in front of the boy facing him. What? The startled boy tried to block Mok Jae-eun with a push kick. However, grip, rip. Mok Jae-eun snatched the boy's ankle with one hand and pulled it. At that moment, the boy's balance crumbled and his body was tilted backward. Ugh. He knew Mok Jae-eun was strong, but this was beyond expectations. Mok Jae-eun, who had pulled the boy's ankle, swung the boy's body towards another boy right next to him. Whoosh. Shit. The surprised boy hurriedly ducked to avoid it. But that wasn't the end. Using the centrifugal force to spin around once, this time he turned downward. Thud. Ack. And smashed the head of the crouching boy with the head of the boy whose ankle he was holding. The two heads collided so hard that the sound of something breaking was heard. It seemed both boys had their skulls shattered. What the... is this guy? 2 were taken out in an instant. What kind of strength does he have that he's so strong without even using internal energy? They attack simultaneously. As one boy shouted, 2 boys charged at Mok Jae-eun. One aimed a kick at his face, while the other slid on the ground from the opposite side, targeting Mok Jae-eun's ankles. This way his balance would be broken no matter what. Or so they thought, but... Whirl, whirl, whirl. Mok Jae-eun instantly kicked the ground and spun his body like a top in midair to avoid it, and then... swish. Whack. Arg. He stomped on the crown of the sliding boy's head with the top of his foot. Thud. The boy, who had hit his chin on the ground, rolled his eyes back and lost consciousness. You bastard. Momentarily surprised, the boy who had aimed for his face didn't miss this chance and kicked the left leg Mok Jae-eun was supporting his body with to knock him over. However, thwack. Ack. The boy grabbed his ankle and staggered. He was clearly the one who had kicked, but his ankle hurt as if it would break. What the... What are you doing? Taken aback by the sight of the staggering boy, another boy ran towards Mok Jae-eun, intending to smash his head with a sharp rock. But before he could do that, Mok Jae-un kicked the boy's ankle. Thwack. Ack. The kicked boy's leg shot up and his body tilted in the opposite direction and fell. Thud. In that instant, Mok Jae-un stepped on the boy's neck. Crack. The boy, whose neck was twisted, died on the spot. Seeing this, the staggering boy and the only boy who hadn't attacked couldn't hide their bewilderment. For were taken out in an instant. Although their internal energy was sealed, they had also learned martial arts and had a numerical advantage, so they thought they could somehow subdue him. But that expectation was completely off the mark. This guy's pure strength alone was close to the second-rate level. Only then did they feel regret. When Soa suggested bringing him in, they should have somehow stopped her. They had messed with the wrong person. Aya. At that moment, the only boy who hadn't attacked chose to flee. He had no confidence in dealing with that monster-like guy. 5 of them had attacked and failed. How could he handle it alone? That bast. The boy with the twisted ankle cursed inwardly at the fleeing boy. But even though he cursed, he understood. Now running away was the right choice. Swish. At that moment, the boy with the twisted ankle's eyes widened. Gasp. Thud. The ankle of the boy who had been running to escape was pulled back and he fell. What the is going on? While wondering, he saw Mok Jae-un extending his hand towards the fallen boy and making a pulling gesture. Then, rip. At that moment, the boy's leg, no, his body was being dragged backward. It was an unbelievable sight. As seizing objects in midair? Seizing objects in midair, 1. It is a technique where a profound internal energy master pulls objects or desired things with true energy. Seeing something that only a supreme master at the peak of transcendence could do being performed right in front of his eyes, the boy couldn't help but be shocked. No way. What the is going on? Not only is he doing this, but his internal energy should definitely be sealed, right? It was a moment of confusion. And oh no. Skid, skid, skid. The fallen boy tried to hold onto the ground somehow to resist, but he was dragged, leaving long nail marks. The ankle of that boy was caught by Mok Jae-un's outstretched hand. Crack. Arg. As soon as he grabbed the ankle, Mok Jae-un twisted it. The boy, whose ankle was bent in the opposite direction, screamed, but Mok Jae-un stepped on the back of his neck. Crack. The screaming boy's breath was cut off. Ah. The face of the boy with the twisted ankle, who had been watching this, turned deathly pale. They had really messed with someone they shouldn't have. The term monster didn't fit him. Evil spirit was more appropriate. How could such a guy exist? Even if the seal on his internal energy was released, could he handle this evil spirit who could use seizing objects in midair? Tremble, tremble. His body was shaking violently. He wanted to regain his balance, but his legs went weak and he fell. Thud. Mok Jae-un turned his head towards him, smiled and walked over. Then, bending his knees and lowering his body, he said, what did you say just now? SP spare. Tap. At that moment, Mok Jae-un grabbed the boy's head. The boy screamed and tried to shake off his hand, but, crack. Mok Jae-un twisted the boy's neck. Then, looking into the eyes of the boy who had died with his head twisted, he smirked. It's good that I don't give false hope, right? With those words, Mok Jae-un, holding the dead boy's head, chanted the oral secrets of the art of binding technique in his mind. It was a delightful mealtime. He had to absorb the death energy when the loss was minimal. Taek. Damn, he's completely crazy. The running boy. The boy was trembling because of the scene he had just witnessed. He had heard screams while keeping his distance and was startled, so he had approached closer, but he was terrified upon seeing that sight. He hadn't even gotten close to the flag, but Soa and her teammates had been indiscriminately killed. No, it was almost at the level of a massacre. An evil spirit. An evil spirit. Moreover, was his internal energy really sealed? It seemed like it wasn't. In the end, that looked like seizing objects in midair, pulling with true energy no matter how he looked at it. Does that make sense? A technique that only a profound internal energy master could perform, yet a guy who's not even 17 years old can do it? Was utterly confusing. But even though his mind was in turmoil, one thing was certain. I have to let them know. Whether it was the other guys or the people of the Corpse Blood Valley conducting this gateway, he had to inform them. He's already a dangerous guy, but if he's the only one whose internal energy isn't sealed, it's no different from cheating. At that moment, as if he had collided with something, The boy's body was thrown backward. Startled, the boy performed a falling technique, turned around, took a stance and looked ahead with surprised eyes. But he couldn't see anything. What did I collide with? Puzzled, he stood up and unconsciously turned his head. At that moment, gasp. The boy screamed and fell backward. Peace. The boy doubted his own eyes. In front of his eyes, there was a blurry form of something, and it was a giant monk wearing a skull rosary around his neck. The demonic monk was looking down at him with white eyes, and it felt like his heart would stop. Chapter 60. Mortal, you're really... Chong Ryong clicked her tongue. She had wondered why he was joining as a teammate when it didn't suit him. But to think he had this kind of plan. Did you intend this from the beginning? How could I miss such a convenient opportunity? Mok Jung-un smiled and approached the last remaining person. No, corpse. That corpse was the girl named Sowa, the first one whose neck Mok Jung-un had twisted. Mok Jung-un placed his hand on the girl's head and chanted the oral secrets of the art of binding technique in his mind, absorbing the remaining death energy. Whoosh! The absorbed death energy spread throughout his body. Directly absorbing it like this allowed him to secure a larger amount compared to when it tried to disperse into the air during the iron ball struggle. However, I should go in order of who died first from now on. Absorbing in the order of who was closest resulted in a significant loss of Sowa's death energy. It hadn't completely disappeared, but it was less compared to the others. Still not bad. He had already secured a much larger amount of death energy than at Yun Mok Sword Manor. If he could just remove the Forbidden Gate lock inserted in his chi channels, he could greatly expand his Danjian through chi circulation. Seems like coming here was a good choice. Good choice. Don't tell me. At that moment, the sound of someone's presence was heard from somewhere. Rustle. Soon someone revealed themselves. It was a boy. Seeing the boy approach with familiar eyes, Mok Jung-un chuckled and said, "You could have just killed him, but you possessed him? I thought it might be necessary, so I brought him." As soon as he finished speaking, thud, the boy's body collapsed and the blurry form of the evil spirit appeared. Mok Jung-un said with satisfaction, "Thank you very much." He had ordered one thing, but to have his intentions understood like this. He couldn't be anything but an excellent familiar. Mok Jung-un approached the fallen boy. After twisting the boy's neck, he absorbed the death energy. It didn't take long. Having finished all this, Mok Jung-un stretched his muscles with a refreshed expression. Phew. Feels good. Mortal. What do you intend to do? What do you mean? From the looks of it, you don't seem like you'll be satisfied with just these guys. At Chong Ryong's words, Mok Jung-un smiled. Then looking up at the mountain, he said, "I should have a delightful mealtime until dawn. As much as possible. Anyway, according to the passing criteria, as long as he left at most 7 people, that should be enough." A damp and dark cave at the foot of the mountain. Sizzle. The demon mask walked in with 2 warriors holding torches. As soon as they entered the cave, the expressions of the 2 warriors stiffened. That's because from the moment they entered the cave, a strange energy stimulated their chi sense. It was quite different from human presence or energy. It was unpleasant and gave them goosebumps. It's suffocating. That was the state of mind of the 2 warriors. However, the demon mask entered deeper as if he was used to it. As he did so, a voice came from deep within the cave. "Are you the Valley Master of the Corpse Blood Valley?" "That's right. The fire is bright." At the voice coming from inside, the demon mask signaled the 2 warriors to stop. "What? You 2 wait here." "But... wait." "Yes, sir." Leaving them behind, the demon mask went deeper into the cave alone. Inside, someone wearing a Taoist robe with yin and yang symbols was standing. As if he had been waiting, he clasped his hands together and bowed his head. "You've come." The demon mask asked him, "Are the preparations done? Is there even a need to ask? What is it this time? I heard they're quite dangerous compared to last time." At these words, the man in the Taoist robe smiled and replied, "Of course they're dangerous if released carelessly." "I suppose so. Are they the ones behind the iron bars?" "That's right." At the answer of the man in the Taoist robe, the demon mask looked back. But a strange sound came from there. Oink oink. It sounded like a pig's cry. There's no way there would actually be pigs, so what could they look like? The demon mask was curious and tried to peek at where the iron bars were. Then the man in the Taoist robe blocked him and said, "It's better not to approach too closely. No matter how controlled they are, even those who haven't reached maturity are fierce beasts. Fierce beasts. Beasts beyond beasts, was it? The demon mask looked behind the man in the Taoist robe. There, something dangerous with rat-like eyes was staring intently at him. What did you call that thing? It's a Galgio. Brought from the northern sea near Mount Beihu. Galgio. Even the name sounded ominous. The demon mask turned around and said, "All right. Release them when you see the signal." Half an hour had passed since the flag defense battle began. The mountain was vast, and perhaps because the flags were meticulously hidden, no one had discovered them yet. But there was someone who found it first. It was the boy from the Esoteric Realm Gate. The boy's name was Yun Wuong, and as soon as he found the flag, he ran towards it with excitement. Found it. If the flag had been a brighter color, it would have been easier to find, but the color was dark and the location was cunningly concealed in the bushes, making it difficult to find. But there was a reward for searching thoroughly without rest. The pole is quite long. Yun Wuong, who had approached close to the flag, grabbed the pole. It was to pull out the flag and secure a suitable location. However, the flag, which he thought would be easy to pull out, wouldn't budge from the ground. The pole itself wasn't that heavy, so why was that? Puzzled, Yun Wuong soon discovered the reason. What? The bottom of the flag was connected to a large lump of iron. The size was quite big, and even for Yun Wuong, who had trained external techniques and had muscular strength, it felt quite heavy to lift. Holding the pole and moving will be even heavier. In that case, he had to hold the iron lump at the bottom and move. At first, he wondered why they had made the flag this way, but soon he thought it was rather fortunate. If it was this heavy, it would be difficult for other guys to move the flag, since their internal energy was sealed. This gateway might be easier than expected. He thought that among those who found the flags, there would be some who maliciously tried to eliminate other flags or seize them to reduce the number of people passing. But if the flag was like this, it would be difficult to carry and move, so there would be few who would go to the trouble of seizing someone else's flag. Good. Then I need to gather teammates and defend the location. He just needed to endure until dawn. Meanwhile, on a mountain ridge 200 zhang northwest of where Yun Wuong from the Esoteric Realm Gate was, there was someone who had discovered another flag, albeit later. She was none other than the girl from the Demon Fire Hall. The girl's name was Mo Harang. The joy of finding the flag was short-lived, and she too couldn't hide her perplexity upon seeing the iron lump connected to the bottom of the flag pole. Heavy. The iron lump was extremely heavy for her to lift. It couldn't be helped since her chi channels were blocked, and the martial arts she had learned were based on swiftness, so her muscle mass wasn't thick, making it even more difficult. Moving is impossible. Even if she tried to secure a good location with the flag, she needed teammates. Defending the flag alone was a difficult task. It would be nice if I could break the pole. The flag must be in its complete state. There had been a warning beforehand, so the iron lump was also one with the flag. In the end, the only answer was to wait. However, Mo Harang, who had been fiddling with the upper part of the flagpole by chance, frowned. It was because something was engraved on the upper part of the flag. Without holding a torch and only relying on the moonlight shining through the bushes, it was difficult to see with the naked eye, but, rub. When she touched it with her hand, she could roughly tell what was written. E1 geometry say Ji Wu Yok Hyan. As she rubbed and deduced what the engraved text said, she could be certain. It was the stance formula of a sword art. And it was a bit different from ordinary sword arts. Could this be? Her guess was correct. Tap. Mo Harang's eyes narrowed. The oral secrets had ended. Up to this point, one might not feel anything particularly strange, but it wasn't the case for her. Incomplete. In her view, the oral secrets were incomplete. If it was the stance formula of a sword art, there was no way it would end here. Most martial arts aim to effectively subdue and kill the opponent, but conversely, they also serve the purpose of protecting oneself. Mo Harang closed her eyes. Swish swish. A sword art was visualized in her mind. It was a bit lacking to be called an advanced sword art, but the sword techniques weren't bad. However, according to these oral secrets, 4 gaps would be created. It meant that there were exactly 4 spots that couldn't be blocked with the available sword techniques. An incomplete sword art. This was strange. She wanted to overlook it, she could. but they had engraved the oral secrets of a sword art on the flagpole right below the flag, which could be easily passed over without much thought. Moreover, it was an incomplete set of oral secrets. No matter how she thought about it, she couldn't help but be bothered by it if she just passed it by. Then she suddenly had this thought. Could it be? She hoped it wasn't the case, but she felt she had to check. She boldly decided to give up the flag she had barely found. Still, as if she had some lingering attachment, Mo Harang stared at the flag for a while, then broke the upper part of the pole where the oral secrets were engraved. Snap. If it's not mine anyway. There was no need to let other guys have it. Mo Harang buried the broken upper part of the flag in the ground out of sight and ran. About 2 hours had passed like that. Unlike before, there were people who found flags here and there and teams were formed. And naturally, as intended in this gateway, there were also confrontations when two teams simultaneously discovered one flag. The two teams fiercely fought a bloody battle to claim the flag. Their internal energy was absent, so it was almost like a brawl, but in the end the victor was decided. Huff huff. The winning teammates exhaled rough breaths, covered in blood. They newly realized how difficult it was to fight without internal energy. A boy barely got up and surveyed the surroundings. Out of the 8 teammates, only 5 survived. He had hoped no one would die, but that was just wishful thinking. Fortunately, they had defended the flag and they just needed to find 3 more teammates. Whether that would be easy, he didn't know. What should we do? We have to defend the flag and wait, right? Of course. We might lose the flag if we wander around. Everyone seemed to agree. But one boy offered a different opinion. Wait a minute. If we just stay here and defend the flag, won't we be at a disadvantage if another intact team appears? That made sense too. It was truly a dilemma. But they couldn't give up the flag they had barely claimed. While they were thinking that, "You found the flag?" Gasp. Everyone's gaze turned to where the voice came from. Seeing someone standing there, they tensed up for a moment but soon felt relieved. It was because they saw only one person standing. Thank goodness. If it had been another intact team, they would have been in trouble. As that one person approached and revealed his face, the expressions of the relieved teammates stiffened. It was none other than Mok Jae-eun. The guy with the cruel hands, whom they were reluctant to accept as a teammate, had appeared. Stop right there. Don't move. Who are you? A boy stopped Mok Jae-eun from approaching and asked. Who, you ask? Didn't you join the team with some woman? This boy had seen Mok Jae-eun join the team with Soa, the soul girl. That's why he was asking this. At this, Mok Jae-eun made a regretful expression and said, They were all defeated. Defeated? Yes. Mok Jae-eun moved his eyes, glanced at the corpses around and casually said, Our team also fought another team over the flag like you guys and they were all defeated, so I barely escaped. You escaped alone? Yes. With my tired body, I couldn't face 4 of them alone. At Mok Jae-eun's words, the boys looked at him with suspicious eyes. But it wasn't just suspicion. They had just experienced a similar situation, so they thought it could certainly happen. To them, Mok Jae-eun spoke in a gentle voice. Since we both lost teammates, I think we fit together, so if it's not a burden, could you accept me? They hesitated at this proposal. The reason they didn't accept him as a teammate in the first place was because he was creepy. That wariness wouldn't easily dissipate. So they whispered cautiously and discussed among themselves. What should we do? That guy is a bit weird. Should we just let him go? But then what about the flag? It's barely been 2 hours. There were still more than 2 hours left until dawn. If other guys attacked during that time, they would inevitably lose the flag. Then they would have to find a flag again, but it would be difficult with just 5 people. Let's accept him. Accept him. Yeah. Anyway, even that guy knows that we have to cooperate to pass this gateway, right? Well, that's true. Because 8 people are needed to pass. No matter how reckless he was, he would still think that they had to join forces and defend this flag to pass this gateway. Considering this, no matter how much of a troublemaker he was, he absolutely couldn't harm them. Having become convinced like this, one of the boys said to Mok Jae-eun, All right. But remember, until dawn we are one. If we betray each other, we're dead. Keep that in mind. At the boy's words, Mok Jae-eun nodded. But his lips were twitching as if holding back laughter. This is too good. It felt like they were setting the table for him. Chapter 61. A dead boy's head was grasped by Mok Jae-eun as he performed the ritual of binding. Not long after, he absorbed all the remaining death chi from the boy. Nice. Mok Jae-eun smiled. He had absorbed the death chi of a whopping 16 people. Even without sealing his meridians to gather it in his dantian, his entire body's blood vessels were brimming with chi. He seemed to be quite lucky. 11 of them had died fighting each other from the start, and the remaining 5 were considerably fatigued. As a result, he could kill them without exerting much effort. How convenient. Those fools have made a foolish move. Chong Ryong agreed with Mok Jae-eun's words. Thanks to them sealing everyone's meridians with the Jamunso, it became advantageous for Mok Jae-eun. If they were in a situation where they could use their internal energy, it would have been difficult to kill the boys in this manner. But thanks to that, he was easily securing death chi. Well, if they're going to die competing with each other anyway, it's better for them to become the death chi of that guy. After all, she was a vengeful spirit. As such, she didn't particularly feel pity. Besides, in a place where people were killing each other to pass through the barrier, it was meaningless to dwell on such matters. By the way, I suppose that must be the flag. Indeed. Mok Jae-eun set down the severed head and approached the flag. Although he had no intention of claiming the flag yet, his gaze was inevitably drawn to it as it was the objective of this barrier. What will you do with the flag? If you're not going to take it now, break it and throw it away. I should. Or it might be more convenient to carry one around in advance for later. That's not a bad idea either. As he said that, Mok Jae-eun reached to grab the flagpole but then stared intently at something. Even though his internal energy was sealed, his 5 senses were far more developed than ordinary people. What is it? There's something written right below the flag, near the base of the pole. What does it say? 3 forms sword technique, break through the haze with sword light. As Chong Ryong heard the mnemonic Mok Jae-eun was reading, she immediately realized what it was. That is a mnemonic for sword technique stances. Sword technique. Hearing it, it does seem that way. Mok Jae-eun agreed, as it was a mnemonic describing sword stances. But why would such a thing be written here? Read the rest. Unattached thread connects sword and man as one, spirit moves unhindered. As he continued reading, Mok Jae-eun said, "That's it." What? That's it? Chong Ryong questioned, and Mok Jae-eun asked as if puzzled. Is there a problem? The stances seem to be cut off midway. Cut off midway? Yes. If these are the only stances, then the Gokji, Sinju, Gonrian and Waijung acupoints would have gaps. So it's an incomplete set of stances? It doesn't seem like that's the case. Rather than an advanced sword technique, seeing how it focuses on the fundamentals and the stances don't overlap. Seeing how. It seems like it was created for a sword formation. A sword formation, like arranging swords in a formation? Yes. But with only these stances, the weaknesses are glaringly obvious, so even if you make a sword formation, it would be shoddily put together. Shoddily put together? Huh. What an interesting expression. I didn't say it to be interesting. In any case, there must be a reason for deliberately writing an incomplete sword technique here. Mok Jae-eun nodded in agreement with Chong Ryong's opinion. Just as the steel marbles had numbers engraved on them, this was likely a hidden task of the barrier. Mok Jae-eun, who had been intently staring at the mnemonic, said, "There may be more to these flags than meets the eye. Didn't they say there were 40? That's not what I meant. I'm talking about types." Types? Yes. Could there possibly be other flags with the remaining stances written on them? Oh ho. That's quite a plausible idea. This time, Chong Ryong agreed with Mok Jae-eun's words. It was quite likely. If, as you say, the stances hidden on the flags are of 2 types, then those who discover this will inevitably try to find other flags rather than just defending their own. I think the same. 2 types of flags. It didn't end with just finding one flag. In the end, having 8 people stay at the flag location until dawn was just the visible task. And the hidden task seemed to be completing the divided sword stances. Interesting. It was inciting a fight in one way or another. Those who didn't notice this would simply end it like that, but any slightly meticulous fellows would make a move to aim for the other flags. The conclusion was that Mok Jae-eun also had to find one flag of the other type. And naturally, 7 teammates had to be with that flag. It's gotten a bit tricky. But now that we know how it works, we'll have to select accordingly. As he said that, Mok Jae-un snapped the flagpole with the mnemonic written on it using one hand. Crack. As Chong Ryong had said earlier, it was to dispose of the flag. But at the moment he broke it, flinch. Mok Jae-un frowned while looking at the flag. What's wrong? There was spell power imbued in the flagpole. Spell power? Spell power literally refers to the power of spells or techniques. Mok Jae-un, who had become more sensitive to various types of qi after absorbing death qi with reverse cycling and learning spells, felt it. However, Chong Ryong, who was inside a wooden puppet and unable to sense spell power, asked, "Could it be a trap? It doesn't seem like that. If it were a trap, the spell power would have remained intact." But the fact that the spell power disappeared the moment the flagpole was broken meant that, Pythei. Just then a sound like a horn echoed throughout the entire mountain. Judging from the regularity of the sound, it seemed like a signal. Kukukukuk. Hearing this, Mok Jae-un lightly crushed the broken flagpole with one hand and muttered, "There must be something else besides this." Not far away, at a place where a flag was planted on a mountain ridge, another battle for the flag was about to unfold. A group of 8 who had discovered it first was trying to defend the flag, while a group that arrived later was attempting to seize it from them. The group of 8 defending the flag here was none other than those led by a boy named Yeom Jae from Vermilion Slaughter Valley. Thwack. Ugh. A boy who was hit by Yeomga's swift kick was sent flying backward. Shit. He's too strong. The boy who was knocked back thought in dismay as he recovered. Since internal energy was banned, he thought they could somewhat evenly match those from Vermilion Slaughter Valley. However, their fundamentals were on a different level. It seemed they had diligently trained in external techniques as well, as the power of the kick was no ordinary matter. No wonder they're from Vermilion Slaughter Valley. He started to think they might have picked the wrong opponent. The other guys seemed somewhat manageable, but thud, ack. Unfortunately, there wasn't much difference. Anyone could see they were being pushed back. They were no match from the beginning. Even Yeom Jae from Vermilion Slaughter Valley seemed to realize the difference in skill level as he gestured and taunted. "Hey, if you're going to charge in, at least show some persistence." Shit. They were angry but couldn't do anything about it. Crack. Kook. No. One of the boys had his neck broken by a boy from Yeomga's group and was defeated. Not much time had passed since they charged in, but 2 had already lost their lives. If they suffered any more losses, their group would be annihilated. The leader of the boys, judging that it was hopeless, shouted, "Retreat." At the leader's cry, the other boys who had been desperately trying to seize the flag seemed to agree as they fled without looking back. Yeom Jae from Vermilion Slaughter Valley smiled bitterly and muttered, "Who says you can leave?" Charging in was up to them, but did he seem like someone who would let them go easily? He had to kill them all and make an example out of them so that other guys wouldn't thoughtlessly aim for their flag. Capture them all. Thwack. Ack. Just then Yeom Jae from Vermilion Slaughter Valley shut his mouth. What was that just now? A boy who was attempting to flee the fastest towards the opposite bushes suddenly disappeared with a scream as a dark shadow swept by. A momentary silence fell. From the boys who were trying to pursue with rising killing intent to the boys who were trying to escape, they all looked at where the shadow had passed with startled eyes. Crunch. Crunch. The bushes rustled and sounds of something being chewed could be heard. That sound was horrifyingly ominous. What was that just now? The boys unknowingly took steps back at the unpleasant noise. Then a sound came from the rustling bushes. Oink oink. What was that? At first listen it sounded like a pig's squeal. However, the bizarre glint faintly visible between the bushes was enough to make one shudder. The fleeing boys were taking steps back when the bushes shook. And then something revealed itself from there. The expressions of the boys who saw it all stiffened identically. Thud. What extended hook-shaped front legs was not human. It resembled a wolf but was also different. It seemed to be about twice the size of an ordinary wolf, with red fur on its head and rat-like completely black eyes. What is this? A wolf? There are wolves like this. It's too big. Oink oink. The monstrous beast making pig noises opened its mouth, revealing razor-sharp teeth filling its entire maw. Gulp. A boy who swallowed dryly out of tension shouted, "Run away." The moment that cry ended, the boys turned their bodies to the right. Then, pounce. The red-headed wolf beast instantly caught up to the boy at the very rear and, chomp, it bit into his calf. Then with tremendous jaw strength, it thrashed the boy around. Thud, thud, ugh. It only thrashed him around a couple times, but the boy had already lost consciousness, either dead or passed out. His calf, nearly severed by the sharp teeth, was tattered. The wolf-like beast approached the boy's head and swallowed it whole. Crunch, crunch. At that sight, the boys defending the flag turned deathly pale. Right before their eyes, a beast was chewing on a person's head, so it would be stranger not to feel fear. This was the same for Yom-Jae from Vermilion Slaughter Valley. Shit. What rotten luck to have such a bizarre creature appear when internal energy was sealed. It didn't seem to be an ordinary monstrous beast. Even against regular wolves, it would be difficult to face them bare-handed when unable to use internal energy. Let alone a beast of that size. It went beyond difficult. They might have to risk their lives. Should we flee? It no longer seemed like a situation where they could defend the flag. But it was also absurd to give up on the flag they had finally obtained because of that damn beast. Right then, oink oink. The beast that had crushed and swallowed the boy's head now looked in their direction. Then, as if it had chosen a target, it scraped its hind legs on the ground and tried to launch its body forward. At this, Yom-Jae from Vermilion Slaughter Valley tried to shout. Run. Pounce. Squeal. The moment the charging beast had only taken about 5 steps, it suddenly saw something and screamed, frantically stepping back. Then, snorting and exhaling through its nose, it changed direction. Swish. That direction was where the group of boys who had tried to seize their flag and ran away were. A boy who was fleeing in a panic while screaming said, what? Why is it suddenly acting like that? At this, Yom-Jae from Vermilion Slaughter Valley irritably muttered. Shit. How should I know? He also couldn't understand why the beast suddenly behaved that way. It looked like it was startled after seeing something. So he turned his head to look in the direction the beast had been looking, and that was the flag. Huff. Huff. Ugh. 3 boys were running like crazy. They weren't headed in a specific direction but just dashing towards whatever they could see. The terrified boys felt like their hearts would burst. Shit. 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 While fleeing, another one of them was caught. Since internal energy was sealed and they couldn't use lightness skills, their running speed was only slightly faster than ordinary adult men. But that monstrous beast was different. It seemed to be even faster than a galloping horse. At this rate, will we all die? As this was happening, the running boy's eyes caught sight of a figure standing on the opposite side. He was momentarily startled and about to change direction, but realizing it was a person, he inwardly felt relieved. What? Who is that? And then upon seeing him, he recognized him at a glance. It was that guy who had passed through first with a brutal hand during the steel marble competition. In a different situation, he would have ignored or avoided him, finding him unpleasant, but the boy shouted with a glimmer of hope. Hey, help us. Surely that guy had also formed a group. If they all helped, maybe they could somehow face this monstrous beast. But what was with that guy's clothes, and why was there so much blood on his hands? Flinch. Moreover, looking at them running over, the corners of his mouth curled into a smile reaching his ears.